wanted my talk today to not necessarily be a talk just about soil health and like same old soil health. Like we know that that's important, especially you guys here. Like you guys know that soil health is important. I don't need to preach to you that we need soil health, but want to talk about how do we make soil healthy. You know, what can we do? How do we keep moving this stuff forward? And some of the little info on some of the things I'm working on. So for you guys that don't know a lot about me, Mitchell Hora, we farm north of Washington, so about 45 minutes or so south of here, almost an hour south of here. Corn, soybean farm, and this is our third year with cover crops now, trying to do some things with soil health, bring that in, and started my company Continuum Ag over 2 years ago now, almost 2.5 years ago now, as a consulting and data management company focused on soil health. So we've been doing a lot of soil health testing, especially with the Haney soil health test, but doing a lot of other tests as well. We've sent samples to like 10 different labs this year, and doing some repetitive soil testing, so taking samples multiple times throughout the year to look at changes in nutrient availability throughout the year, and we'll get into some of that a little bit more. But farm down there, and so we're practicing some of this stuff as well and learning as we go and trying to help facilitate learning at a larger group. So since we're not going to just talk about soil health, you know, what are we going to talk about? So first I'll tell you this stuff that we aren't going to talk about, and then we'll go into some of the stuff we've learned so far, and then how can we, you know, work together and move forward here. And we got to go out and reach out to some more people here, obviously, from this, so we're going to have to go and get after it here afterwards. So some of the stuff that we're not going to talk about. Okay, so definition of soil health. Like we've heard this, there's not a lot of good consistency on what is the definition of soil health, but NRCS definition is the continued capacity of soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. So and I think my key takeaway is a living ecosystem, you know, and the thing that's alive in our soil is the biology. So I try to tie in the biology a lot. And how do we cater to the biology? How do we get those microbes to work for us? But for me, overall, soil health is just balance. You know, how do we keep our soils in balance? Whether that be carbon and nitrogen, whether that be calcium and magnesium, whether that be the inputs that we put on, are we taking them off as far as how many pounds of nitrogen does it take to produce a bushel of corn? Are we being consistent there? And keeping things level, or even erosion. So there's a calculation to be able to identify our erosion. Are we stopping erosion? Are we building soil at the same rate that we're losing it? That's what we want to do with creating some balance. Benefits of soil health. I mean, we've heard these things a bunch. We don't need to go over them with you guys. I mean, sustainability, biomimicry, getting those microbes going, yields, or reducing inputs, I think is how we can pay for some of this in the short term. Improving yield, profitability, creating balance, improving water quality. But we already know this stuff. There's a bunch of different tests as well for soil health. Haney test is what I've primarily been doing, and but there's a number of other ones too, and we'll show some of this. So there's some argument, I guess, on okay, what tests do we want to use? What tests can really pinpoint what is my soil health? I think any of these tests are tools that you can use. They're all a little bit different. So it's picking what test is going to work for your operation. What do you want to learn and utilize that test? By picking specific ones, you can be more efficient too with your money and identify what you want to learn, and you're able to go from there. So I mean, we're using all of these different tests, and it depends on what you want to learn. Okay, so some of the things we've learned so far. Like I said, down in Washington County, we have the highest amount of cover crops of any county in Iowa. And guys have been doing this stuff for a long time. So we've got guys that have been almost 20 years of continuous cover crop, to guys that are conventional tillage and working into a cover crop system. So it's trying to work with everyone along the whole spectrum and make baby steps towards improving soil health. So that's what we're after. So now we know that we can improve soil health, though. We can see changes not only in the long term, but in the short term as well. Soil parameters do fluctuate a lot, though, throughout the year. We've been pulling soil tests this year every 15 days in the same spots, repetitive testing, and looking at changes in nutrient availability. And I'll show some of that data later, but even every 15 days, those parameters are fluctuating. Nitrogen, especially, microbial activity fluctuates a lot as well. So we need to develop an understanding of what is causing that fluctuation. And when we have that understanding, now we can better control it. With the whole aim being, how do those nutrients change throughout the year? When do my nutrients come available? So if I apply in the fall, are all of them available come April 20th when I'm planting? Or do they not really come available till June or August or maybe the year after? When are those nutrients coming available? That's what we're trying to identify. Now we're throwing a wrench into the game with cover crops. Okay, now I'm tying up nutrients with my cover crop, which is good. We want to tie up those nutrients. We don't want them being lost to the water. But because we're tying up those nutrients, we need to know, when do I get them back? Then I can deploy precision ag to fill the void. So if we're tying them up at the beginning, maybe we need to get a little bit more on with the planter, or a little bit more with our burn down, or a spring pre-applied application in order to compensate for that tie-up, knowing that the cover crop will release our nutrients later in the year. So I'll show you some of the stuff we've been doing there. A couple takeaways that we've solved just this year, 1 year of really intensely doing this stuff. Manure improved biological activity by 11%. Cover crops improved biological activity by 5%. And what that's doing is that's only Southeast Iowa data, and it's just a group. There's I've got about 100 different zones that we were testing. Fairly well 50-50 between manure and no manure, cover crops and no cover crops. And this is what we were able to find was our improvements to biology as an average throughout the year. So some of the stuff, even in 1 year, we can see improvements. So definitely come and check out our booth here afterwards too. I've got 2 CO2 sensors going, and these CO2 sensors can monitor CO2 respiration in real time using infrared. Dr. Rick Haney sent them to me. And what I've got is I've got a no-till soil versus a cover crop soil. And you can literally watch on my computer the biological activity come to life. And what we do is those soils are both dried down. We dug them yesterday. I mean, they're fresh stuff. Had to do it yesterday or else it was way too frozen to do it before. But so we got some of that soil yesterday from a couple different management scenarios, dried them down. Then you re-wet that soil with a set amount of water, basically representing the rainfall. And then on my computer we can watch the biological activity respond. Because when it's dry, the microbes just kind of go dormant, just like what they do over the winter. But now when you re-wet them, they get excited, and we can watch that. But so what? Okay, so we can definitely clearly see there the no-till situation, the microbes they're responding, but not a lot. Under the cover crop situation, they're going like crazy. Okay, cool. We have more microbes responding under the cover crop. But now it's, okay, what does that mean? Because I have good biological activity, how quickly can we decompose residue? How quickly can we convert nutrients back and make them plant available? How quickly can we cycle nitrogen? How quickly can we cycle carbon or phosphorus or whatever we want? So that's what we're able to do now and look at that in real time. So what we're also going to be able to do with those sensors is we could take some of your soil, just go out, take a soil sample, we'll dry it down. We wouldn't even have to necessarily dry it down, but take 2 jars of your soil and then treat each one separately. I was talking with the Verdesian guy. So if we had 1 jar that we put in Verdesian's Nutrisphere versus a jar where we put in N-Serve and just see what the microbes do. So we'll do some of that stuff. It'll be fun. Just seeing what those microbes want. So the thing there, like now with a bunch of biologicals and stuff coming, so what if we would be able to take your soils, apply 2 different biologicals to each different jar and see which one responds and plays nice with your natural biology. Then that's a product that you can use. Or if you're interested in urea versus AMS or whatever it may be, we could put urea in one jar, AMS in the other jar, and see which ones the microbes like better. So,
have you seen a difference between guys using liquid N versus mainly urea versus anhydrous?
yeah, so looking at liquid versus urea and anhydrous, we're going to be doing a little bit more this year with that. I don't have really good conclusion data there. Do have a little bit on anhydrous though, like anhydrous in the knife versus between knives, and there's differences. That anhydrous, I mean, it's pretty nasty stuff. We know what anhydrous does to our skin, and microbes are made out of the same things that we are, so it's basically frying them as well in that furrow, you know, where they're being contacted. But over time, I mean, we're knocking them back. They respond because we're feeding them too. So, I mean, they're going to bounce back. They're going to respond. But where we're trying to build soil health, we want to build consistently over time. Anytime that we knock them back, then they have to get back to where they were. If we didn't knock them back, we could keep them going consistently up. That's what we want to try to do. So, but with anhydrous, it's cheap. Like, so we're using it still. But there's a lot of new additives and stuff coming out as well to help reduce the impact of that. So,
have you done any testing on the different biologics yet? Or no?
Biologicals, we have multiple coming this year. So multiple different stabilizers and multiple biologicals that we're testing this year. Stuff like, I mean, even from Mexico and like all over the place. So this year had some stuff from New Zealand. Like I've got some stuff in South Africa too that we're testing some biologicals, and so we've got a lot more coming. And the thing with the biologicals is we got to figure out which ones are good, which ones are going to actually work, and which ones are the snake oil. So it's, let's prove it. We've got the areas to be able to do it on. Now, in Iowa, we're starting with pretty good soils already. So it's law of diminishing returns plays a part that we're already here. How do we get here? It's tough. Where if we're down here, it's, you can see a big jump, you know. And that's,
sands of West Liberty.
yeah. So there, yeah. So over along the river, yeah, we might be able to see some major changes, or a farm that's been farmed poorly, and we know that the soil health there is not very good, and we can quantify that with our testing.
So I know we got the biologicals, but in this last year, I know you've been doing soil samples. What have you seen besides winter and cover crops?
I'll show you some. Okay, so a couple things on here. So taking these samples multiple times throughout the year, what we want to do is we want to evaluate how those nutrients come available based on management practices, cover crops being a big one, tillage versus no-till, products so as well, so like the biologicals, like stabilizers, like new fertilizers. How does weather play a part? Because weather is driving this stuff too. And those microbes are responding to the weather, like what we're able to do with my little demonstration. They're responding to that rainfall. They respond to heat and water and everything as well. And it's the soil biology that's influencing those nutrient processes and influencing those nutrients coming available. So now we're tying all that together with the aim of, we know when corn uses nitrogen. That's what the graph is here. We know when corn uses nitrogen. What we want to do is align nutrient availability in the soil with crop uptake. Because right now, a lot of this, I mean, we're applying a lot of those nutrients in the fall or early spring, or when we don't need them till late. And you know, we're getting preached this stuff all the time. Now what we're able to do with the testing is we're able to actually quantify what is plant available and in what form is it in. So maybe we apply it in the fall, our fall manure or something, but if it's maintaining in the organic form versus going to nitrate, well, okay, maybe that's okay. But if it's all at nitrate in March or 1st of April, and we don't really need a lot of nitrogen until late June, July, August, we need to be able to get that aligned. So that's where we're looking at using the cover crops, using the stabilizers, getting the biology to work for us to align nutrient availability with crop uptake so that we have what we need when we need it without having too much that causes these water quality issues. But we have to have enough that corn doesn't have a bad day. Because corn has the optimal potential when it's in the bag. As soon as we take it out of the bag, then we're losing potential, at every step. If we're putting it in at the wrong planting conditions, if we're banging it up during that process, if we're putting it out there and it doesn't have the nutrients that it needs, or it gets diseased, or it has bad weather, or it's too cold, all we do is lose potential. So we want to make sure that we're optimizing that situation at all times. Little tidbit on some of the data now that we've been learning about with the carbon penalty. So this is one thing that especially guys that are working with no-till or with cover crops, and that see their corn looks a little yellow, it looks like it's nitrogen deficient. It's the carbon penalty stuff. We've got a little bit of data on that. This year we didn't see it quite as bad, but last year it was pretty nasty. I took samples at V1. So it was May 12th. V1 took samples in a variety of different areas and split them between zones with cover crop that looked carbon, like had the carbon penalty, very obvious what was going on. I've got a picture of ours later. Those areas that had the carbon penalty averaged the C to N ratio 70 to 1. We want it to be below 20 to 1. Okay, so at 20, below 20, we mineralize nitrogen back. So below 20, the nitrogen that was tied up in the cover crop is now balanced back out, and it's being released back to the crop. Below 20 to 1. We were at 70 to 1. We had all this carbon, and we didn't balance our nitrogen off. Where guys that were successful didn't have the issue, a lot of them have manure, a lot of them have been doing this for a number of years. They had an average C/N of 12 to 1 at that same time.
Did it matter on the cover crop?
On what kind? It was almost all rye. We were looking at all rye. This year we've got a lot of different mixes and stuff. But how do we avoid this? Not use a bushel and a half of rye. Because now you have so much carbon out there. Rye has a C/N ratio of about the same as corn, 50 some to 1. So we got a lot of carbon. So we can actually split that down. Rye in the roots have a C/N ratio of 50 to 1. Rye above ground has a C/N ratio of 25 to 1. Now that's going to fluctuate a little bit based on what growth stage and stuff, but that's based on an Iowa State study that they released here just a couple years ago. So below ground 50 to 1, I mean, that's where we're causing a lot of our problems too. There's not a lot of material there. No, there's a lot more material above ground in that rye, but the material below ground is 50 to 1 because it's moving that nitrogen up. It's utilizing it for plant processes, taking it out of the ground, so we have to account for that. So we account for that and reduce that problem by not letting your rye get super tall. You have to work towards that. We can do it, and we've done it. We got guys who plant into 7-foot tall rye, but you got to ease into it. For new guys, keeping that stuff pretty small so you can avoid some of these issues. We've also had better success when you spoon feed nitrogen a little bit more. So know that you're feeding the rye and that it's going to be using nitrogen. It's scavenging nitrogen. So you almost feed the rye. When you're feeding that rye, you're able to reduce the C to N ratio in the rye. So instead of now having a C to N ratio of 50 to 1, maybe you can reduce it to 40 to 1 because it has more nitrogen in it. You also have to feed the microbes as well. So they need it to be that below 20 to 1. They even like it closer to 10 to 1, carbon and nitrogen. So those microbes, they have to use nitrogen in order to produce enzymes and break down that cover crop. So we have to feed them nitrogen to be able to do that. So they can get that from the food that they're eating, which there's not a lot there. It's got a high C to N ratio. There's not a lot of nitrogen in that rye. So they pull it from the ground. Well, we're wanting that nitrogen to be there for our corn. That's where we run into these issues. So it compounds when we have nitrogen tied up in the cover crop. Then we kill it, and those microbes are pulling nitrogen from the ground, making our C to N ratio even worse. That's why it was 70 to 1. But now we're looking at, okay, can we fix the seed-to-end ratio in the furrow? With our starter, with the planter, fix seed-to-end ratio in a little area, let the soil do its thing, let the biology do its thing in the rest of the area. Then once our roots grow throughout the rest of the acre, now that soil is balanced out and now it's ready. So that's what we're looking at. And I think we can identify some of those issues before they happen with some of this stuff. And now we know what we're looking for too. So I think that's going to be part of helping more people going forward. I mean, that's kind of the whole talk today is how do we make soil healthy? How do we help other people understand your seed-to-end ratio? That's a big one. Okay, one of the probably biggest things missing with this cover crop stuff is how much is tied up in that cover crop, and even more so, when do I get it back? Okay, this is only 1 year worth of data. We got a lot more work to keep going on this, but we're seeing some potential. Okay, so what we're looking at here, the blue jaggedy line is from the blue jaggedy line and the red jaggedy line are weather station data from one of my farmers in southeast Iowa. Blue line is high temperature for the day. Red line is soil temperature. The red kind of more flat line is non-cover cropped acres. The green line is with cover crops. And we're looking at inorganic nitrogen, okay, nitrate and ammonium. The takeaway here, these samples are taken every 15 days this spring. So we're looking at April 1st through July 1st, every 15 days. And what we're looking at there at the very first one, April 1st, where I did not have cover crop, on average we had 80 pounds of nitrate and ammonium sitting available in our soils. Where I had cover crop, we only had 35 pounds. 45 pounds extra sitting out there at April 1st. We weren't even going to plant for another 15, 20 days. Come back 15 days later, where we see that pretty steep decline where we don't have the cover crop. We did have rain in there. We probably lost some of that. But this is only a 6-inch test as well. It's just going down further into the soil profile. Where the green line we're showing with the cover crop, we've got those nutrients tied up. We're holding them. And what it's looking like is maybe 5-6 weeks after termination, we're getting some of that back. And that's what we see with some of those spikes back.
Looks like it's responding to the heat.
Yes. Okay, so how it responds to the heat. What's really interesting is when I overlay the weather data with the biology, because we have respiration data for all of this as well from the Haney test, and with the nitrogen. What we found this year was that when it gets hot and dry, biological activity goes down. Just like over my demonstrations, once it dries out, biological activity goes down. They have to have water to function. They live in that soil solution. When it's hot and dry, they die off, they go dormant. It was inversely related with nitrogen. Okay, so it gets hot and dry, biological activity goes down, inorganic nitrogen releases. Those microbes aren't holding it anymore, they die off, it comes available. Okay, that's good. I mean, that's good and bad. So it gets hot and dry, those nutrients are sitting out there. If we have plant roots there available to use them, okay, that's good. We also have to have moisture for a plant to be able to take up nitrogen, but now if it's been hot and dry, microbial activity is down, inorganic nitrogen is available, we have a big rain, that stuff's pretty susceptible to be lost. So we're able to identify that now. So basically in utilizing this kind of knowledge to build better nitrogen models and to tie in with current nitrogen models, now we know if it's been hot and dry, it's sitting out there, and then we get a rain, in the models we show we lose some nutrients. Maybe we're losing a little bit more in that situation based on the weather leading up to that time. But
Did you plant in the standing cover, or did you cut the cover and take it off? Plant it stubble? What did you do?
so all of the guys that I've been working with are planting into their cover. Nobody's bailing it off or chopping it off. All the stuff that we looked at this year, none of it was crimped. It was all left standing. But there was a wide variety of killing it when it's 4 inches tall versus killing it when it's Stuff we were testing at most was 3 feet tall. So there is some difference there, and that's going to really tie in with when do those nutrients come back. So now that we're building more data and getting more zones to look at, that's what we're going to be looking at. One of the things I'm going to be working on with Dr. Haney this year is that as well as the plan to identify or to take some samples of that of the living cover crop, and then take biomass samples throughout the year and relate that to the soil availability as well. So identifying how much was in that crop when it was growing, and then measure the degradation and tie that to the release. So coming, but yeah, this is so 1 year worth of stuff, but we are seeing some things happening. This is an example of the Solvita respiration, which is biological activity. So what's interesting here then too, to be able to take to some of your tillage neighbors and stuff, what we found this year was that areas with tillage at April 1st, April 15th, May 1st, areas with tillage did have better microbial activity. Early part of the year, black soil, it's warming up quicker than maybe the cover area or the no-till area. They're getting the sun on them, they're drying out better, and the biology was a little bit better. That switched after we started getting hot and dry. And that's what you see there at May 15th. That blue line was really going up. We were getting hot and dry. That's when we then had to switch those areas that didn't have the cover, that didn't have the insulation. Now those microbes were getting too hot. They're dying off. Where with our covered areas, we were able to maintain better biological activity.
What was your growth stage of your corn at that date?
At May 15th,
Yeah.
that would have been, V1, V2 for the most part this year. So, yeah, and this is all just Southeast Iowa data. But anyway, what we're seeing there is just trying to monitor some of those changes. And it is a little bit jaggedy, but when you interpolate it, or when you look at it with the weather, it does make a lot of sense. Rainfall plays a part in this too. Okay, so, how can we work from here? What stuff can we work on together? What stuff can we work on going forward? I think it's collaborating, learning together. What's something that we're learning? What am I learning on my farm? Cover crop versus no cover crop, or I'm gonna put on 60 units with my planter versus 30 units with my planter, trying to fix that seed-end ratio, see if that works. One person doing one little piece, sharing with your neighbor that's doing something different, because you might be interested in what your neighbor's doing, but that's your number 3 or 4 concern. You want to work on your number 1 concern. Your number 1 concern might be his number 3 or 4 concern, but you can share that together. Networking, sharing this stuff on social media. So we got a lot of stuff going online, and just trying to tell a story here, trying to connect with more people, and helping to make progress quicker than what we can on our own. We do a lot of side-by-side trials. Cover crop versus no cover crop being a big one. Side by side, see what's going on. I really encourage guys to just try new stuff. Whether that be for one round in your field, take your side dress application and cut it in half or turn it off. See what happens. Not a big area, half an acre or an acre at a time. Try stuff and see what happens. And mark it, yes. Mark it off, flag it off. And if you can, GPS it, or we can GPS it for you and know where it's at, and then see what happens. And that's how we're able to learn. But if each guy is doing 1 or 2 of those, and we've got a network of 500, okay, now we're getting somewhere. Now we're learning with each guy doing a 1 acre trial. No big deal. So that's what we're doing, and doing a lot of repetitive testing with that, like you showed there. With that testing over time, we pulled samples 8 times this year on my farmers' fields. I've got a couple other plots where we're pulling soil samples 24 times a year, twice a month, all year round. So I just pulled soil samples last Tuesday, and I think I have one of the pictures in here, but taking soil samples with a cordless drill, and but do what you got to do, and it's interesting. There was a lot of snow, brush away the snow, and still able to take the soil samples. And so I've got that all year round testing on one of my plots. It's a third year cover crop versus about multiple year no-till, side by side, same soil type, and they're 40 feet apart, pulling samples every 15 days, all year round, to evaluate side by side what is the nutrient tie-up with that cover crop and when are we getting it back. So looking at that all year round. We don't have to do that everywhere, but we're doing some of it. Here's a picture that we took last week of pulling soil samples out in the snow. So studying and documenting this stuff. So I think that's really what we're trying to work on. Is there's a lot of good leaders in this area that have stuff figured out, that have been doing it for a long time, and we hear about them a lot. There's also a lot of guys on the complete opposite end of the spectrum that aren't doing really anything at all. We need to help figure out, how do we make baby steps? You know, how do we go from 3 passes of tillage to 2 on a soil health standpoint? You know, how do we try cover crops on 10 acres? You know, we've got multiple guys that are doing that. Conventional tillage guys, this is our second year planting cover crops in their conventional tillage program. 10 acres, no big deal, baby steps, and we're learning. But what we need to do is document that process, documenting pros and cons, and documenting so we can share that knowledge versus just, here's what I do, if you do this, it will work. Because there's a lot of issues that you overcame. So we want to help guys to...
How's it look over different soil types?
This stuff, a lot of it responds pretty well. You know, the same responses in different soil types. So some of my, one big farmer question that I had this year was, yeah, my nitrogen comes available differently in my different soil types. I think one way we're going to go about that is 2 weeks before our product application, 2 weeks before side dress, 2 weeks before we wide drop on later in the year. Let's take a sample, zone kind of sample from that soil type, see where we're at, and then let's split that zone, do the application, and do half the rate, or leave it off. See what happens. Take that yield. It's not, then we're not getting overly aggressive with it. We're not spending a lot of money, but we're learning something there. So what we're going to do is, okay, 3 zones from that field. We'll do that program on my best area, a medium area, and a poor area, and see how they respond. Taking that all the way to yield, we're going to be looking at profitability in step 2 with Ag Solver. So tying in profitability, tying in yield, not only looking at soil health. Because at this point, it's hard to identify and quantify the value of soil health. I think we're getting there, and in the long term, guys that have been working on this say, you know, they're getting better yield, they're being more profitable. We need to help identify that in the short term. So that's what we're working towards now, with keeping track of that yield and economic data.
For a guy who doesn't have starter on the planter doing rye cover crop, what are some of the things he can do to get that nitrogen release, you know, or get the carbon broken down release? What are some of the things you know that?
So that's where we're at. So we don't...
Just loads up the AMS.
Right. So having nitrogen with the planter definitely helps in a cover crop situation, but we don't have nitrogen going on with our planter. So what we're doing, this year we're kind of in a strip till situation. We stripped our anhydrous into the standing rye. Now we're going to plant right on top of that. So now we've got a better seed to N ratio in that strip. So we'll no-till the beans and kind of strip till the corn.
Are you subsoiling anything, or are you just doing...
Just the anhydrous. Just anhydrous. So there's not other nutrients down with that. Other nutrients we've been broadcasting.
So you just killed all your microbial activity right there.
So we've got it stable. So we've got an additive in it that hopefully we're doing better. And it was fall applied. And with the cover crop, what we're wanting to do is, okay, yeah, we're knocking it back with the anhydrous. We'd like to not use anhydrous, but it's super cheap and it's easy. We've been doing it for a long time. So, okay, can we use an additive to reduce some of the immediate effect, and then utilize our cover crop and utilize our no-till, essentially, situation to help get us bounced back?
What
So which one?
additive
that we had Nutrisphere with that stuff this year, but trying a couple new things. There's some new stuff coming that we're going to be trying out as well. As far as other options, I think instead of having starter, definitely spraying AMS has worked. Weed and feed, putting on nitrogen with your burn down. So I think where that's helping is that, okay, we're spraying off our cover crop, adding a little bit of nitrogen in with it. You might not get as quick of a, that you visually see it dying, but I think it then decomposes better because you've got some nitrogen right there directly for those microbes to use, and you're getting that C-to-N ratio down.
20 pound, 30 pound, what are you looking at?
Yeah, so a lot of times usually around there, usually when we're making an application like that, it'd be
that 20, 30 units. And then you can even come back and do that kind of same deal with your post-emerge too. Spoon feed kind of whenever we're going out there is good. If you don't have nitrogen with your planter, you definitely don't want to let it get super tall either, I don't think. Baby step into it, see what you can handle. If you have good biological activity and you have good soil health, then yeah, you don't have to worry about these C-to-N ratio issues quite as much. Because your biology is working, it's cycling like crazy, and you don't have to, your soil is more forgiving.
What's your organic percentage and stuff? Because
I've got some stuff. We've had, so Washington County, my stuff, we've got anywhere from 2.5, 3 to some of our stuff. That guy's been doing this, 5.5.
Pretty pills are up to 5, aren't they?
Yeah, so.
Can you still attach together with their first trials or 4-on-4 trials?
No, I don't have anything with that stuff. No, I don't have anything with their first trial, but yeah, some of our other stuff now, we're seeing a couple different sets of data we were looking at this week, 4.5s to 5.5s. My guys have been 20 years, one guy's been 20, 30 years no-till, the other one's over 40 years no-till. Cover crop, the one guys were 4.5, 5% organic matter, and they only cover crop before soybeans. They're on no-till. That's another way too, if you got guys that are worried about this stuff, cover crop before soybeans works great. Because soybeans, we don't have to worry about the C-to-N ratio. We'd actually maybe like to have a poor C-to-N ratio and get those soybeans to nodulate better. Put more back into the soil, get the biology going better for us, nodulate more. Hopefully that's then giving us a better credit for next year. We're producing more organic nitrogen down in the soil. So doing some more, do some more digs and stuff, looking at that. But couple last things here we can look at, and we don't have to jab for too long. The main stuff that we're looking at with this soil health stuff. So to me, like soil health, it's like, okay, why would you not want soil health? Why would you not want water quality? I think that's why it's taken off, that it's something easy to get behind. But why is not everybody really on board and practicing soil health? I think it comes down to two things. One is the logistical kind of issues. So I don't have to start with my planter. How do I plant into my cover crop? Or I don't have to get good downforce with my planter. How do I plant through all that residue? Or I don't have good row cleaners. Or my soil, I don't have manure. Or whatever it may be. I don't know what cover crop to use. I don't know how much to apply. So there's logistical things. We need to work together to help guys get over, giving advice. That's why seminars and stuff like this work well. But we can share with a lot larger audience too by documenting some of this stuff and putting it on YouTube and those kind of things that guys can use. So we're really looking at the logistics of soil health and not only the practices. Where should I first use cover crops? Where can I be full no-till? Where maybe a strip till a little bit better of an option or something like that. But also looking at what products can help me. So we're doing a lot of testing, like I said, with starter biologicals, new fertilizers, things from all over the world, and trying to tie those in and look at products and evaluate products for not only their efficacy, but their impact on soil health. What products can help me to keep moving in the right direction without knocking me back. We're monitoring those improvements out with the testing. The economic stuff, so this is a picture of our corn, our first year with cover crops. On the left, was planted into rye. It was a little bit too tall. It wasn't huge, but would have been not quite 20 inches, but solid foot. Where on the right side is our no-till situation. And what we're seeing there is, this is where we had bad carbon penalty issues. On the left, we planted that corn into rye that wasn't killed off the right way. It was planted way too thick. Now we plant a rye at about 35 pounds. Mixes even less than that. So we don't have a lot out there now. Drilled rye.
Not blowing it on. And then are you no-till corn on corn or corn on bean?
This is rotated corn bean rotation. What ended up happening here then? What was it?
Pretty much you're telling us this was your first year, right?
This was our first year, first experience with cover crops, and it was a complete disaster. The stuff on the left, we had the carbon penalty issues, we did everything wrong. Didn't get planted, didn't have the planter. The planter was good, we've got all the precision planting bells and whistles on it, but getting it killed off, it didn't change the nitrogen program, then typically all fall anhydrous, and had carbon penalty bad. But the stuff on the right was just awesome, it was growing like crazy. And so this was last growing season in 2016. On the left, yielded 245 bushel the acre, which was our best yield ever, but 245, while the stuff on the right, that was no-till, did 265. So we lost 20 bushel the acre there. This year, soybeans, we got a cover crop in the exact same area. Soybeans didn't show a yield difference. Now we have corn out there next year, and wanting to prove that in 3 years, we can overcome these issues. Because right now, a lot of the literature is saying 10 years before you start seeing returns. That doesn't work.
Part of that comes down to some of the things you talked about. What are you going to do differently now that you learn the
Right.
method?
So now stuff that we're doing differently. So now we've got our anhydrous out here planted into our rye. That rye is also planted super thin. We've got 35 pounds or so of rye out here, and it's pretty small. It doesn't need to get super thick. It doesn't need to be a garden out there. We're just trying to stop some erosion, build some soil health over time, keep some roots out there, keep our microbes happy, kind of tie up a little bit of nitrogen, but we don't care as much here going to.
What do you see in testing difference this year versus last year?
For the soil health stuff. I think we're getting built over time. Last year we didn't get a lot of tests out of here, but now we're starting to see changes over time. One of the big takeaways that we had was that after we harvested here, 245, 265, September, I was pulling soil samples once a month in 2016 on this plot. We're at September 15th was our highest biological activity. September. Now last 2016, September, for both, overall, throughout the whole year, it was our best biological activity, September. We had moisture, we had good temperature, we had fresh residue coming back to the system, I think, from some of the corn leaves that were falling off. September 15th, awesome biological activity. Then we didn't have a whole lot of rain there. We had pretty good harvest conditions. October 15th came back. October 15th, we had our highest inorganic nitrogen availability in this plot. October 15th, right when we do not need a lot of inorganic nitrogen. There's nothing applied. There hadn't been anything applied since early that spring in our corn situation. But I think we had that fresh residue. We had a lot of biological activity going on. We didn't have a lot of rainfall washing that stuff out. We were compounding. We had our highest biological activity. Then my cover crop got going, and we went from, we were at like 40 pounds or so of nitrate ammonium. Once that cover crop got going, and all winter, we were right around 5 pounds with the cover crop. 5 pounds all winter. We're in the no-till situation. We were up there at that 40. We lost a little bit. We had some rain. Then last year, when it was over the winter, we had some warming and cooling. And February was 70 degrees out here. So December, it was in the cover crop area with 5 pounds
You're
available.
talking your 35-pound rate or your 65-pound of your cover crop?
No, this is all, okay, so
You took this crop off, you put 35-pound on.
35 pounds of rye versus the no-till. December nitrate in the cover crop was at 5, and the no cover crop was at like 17 or something like that, like 15 pounds. So there were some differences there. January, we had more release. We had like 25 or something like that pounds where we had no cover crop, still at 5 under the cover crop. It was holding it. February, where we had no cover crop, we were at 35 pounds sitting there available. We were at the cover crop and still at 5. February 15th then, so March 15th, a month later, that 35 was back down to 17. Then I took samples at April 1st, it was at 10. And then at April 15th, we were down at 5. We're under the cover crop, it was at 5 at the time. I think we had that 35 pounds came available, all gone. Now this year, I'm monitoring the same way, and I don't have that spike quite yet. What I've seen in December has been about my highest that I've had all year. Now also, we just applied anhydrous out here along that whole thing. So we gotta factor that in. But where I've got the cover crop, my nitrogen availability is about 10 pounds less than where I've got the no-till. So we're holding some of it. Now we're gonna be able to watch that as it comes back available. So a good plot that we're pulling samples on very consistently and seeing some major changes. But that was pretty wild that we don't typically pull soil samples in December, January, February to see that. We would usually come back and see it in April. Well, in April, they were back balanced out. But we had lost a lot. That's where we're causing some water quality issues. So I've got, I could show, I've got some of that data on my other computer if you guys want to see some of that later. So now, okay, so just looking at better practices, how do we keep the ground covered, reduce the tillage, reduce the inputs? Like, we've got to find the right situations for these to work, and work with where a farmer's at. How do we help a guy to make some baby steps? You don't have to go to a complete swap. From where you're at, you don't have to completely swap to the other system. We're going to have a hard time convincing people to be able to do that. But if we can take baby steps, we can make progress. So we're looking at a lot of new products and stuff as well. Going over this, trying a lot of new things. So what I do for my farmers is encourage them, okay, if you want to try something new, awesome. Let's try it small scale, see what happens. Maybe we can do some testing on it, evaluate, if it's the right thing for you, if it's going to really help us out. And then if it's something that we like, that's good. Now instead of using it on 5 acres, now we're using it on 100 acres next year. We'll try something else on 5 acres. So stepping into new stuff and trying new things, but kind of just my takeaway from today, we'll let you guys go. Just trying to serve as a catalyst here and keeping this data put together and educating people and facilitating growth, facilitating learning together. Got a good core group of guys to learn from and a good network to be able to keep building off of. So trying to connect with more people and learn and figure out what have you learned on your operation, how can we help other people along the way, and whether that be documenting it with drones and that kind of stuff, or gathering some data as well. Try new things, we're out there trying new things, document what you're doing, take a lot of pictures, look at not only the good stuff, but bad stuff too, and helping people to figure out each of the individual little things and how you overcame that. So, you weren't getting depth at the right, you weren't getting your seed at the right depth, and you had to go out and adjust your planter, that kind of stuff. And helping guys to make those adjustments and learn before they have to go out there and learn the hard way. And so document even the little baby step kind of stuff. Like I said, there's a lot of people out there that are even just optimizing nutrients a little bit better. They might not be going full no-till or full cover crops, but if they can go from going at 1.2 pounds of nitrogen per bushel to 1 pound of nitrogen per bushel, we're making some progress. We can help to showcase those guys too, using some data to be able to help monitor them and accelerate what's going on. So that's what I got here for today. A lot of work to do on this stuff, but I think learning together, helping facilitate learning, growing with one another, I think that's the way that we go about this stuff. We know that soil health is important. We know that it's can help water quality and help sustainability and help the environment and all that. But it's, how is that going to work for me? How does that work for my operation? How does that relate to across the fence? It might not work the exact same, but we can learn from each other. And that's the only way I think that we're going to be able to really make major progress with water quality and soil health sustainability is every person doing things 10% better. If we only have a small percent of acres in cover crops now, and even if we put cover crops on every acre, we're still not going to solve all of our problems. But if every person is improving nutrient utilization by 10%, now we get some. So that's what we're after. But any other questions? Yeah?
To address that planter situation, do you see a lot of guys after the cover crop comes out, they go back in and fill it before planting?
So,
a little common.
Yeah, so ask about what about like tilling that cover crop and then planting it. Well, I did have a guy that did that this year, so it's a conventional tillage situation. So now a second year cover crops, like we're trying, it's that baby step. That's what I'm talking about. This is a guy that you would never think would plant cover crops. We'll plant cover crops, yeah, he lightly discs it in, and even in that situation, we were pulling samples where we had cover crop is 6 inches tall, planted at 35 pounds, and killed it early, disced it under, and still with our testing, almost every time had better biological activity where we had that cover crop. Disced it in, but it's a step in the right direction. Some of his other stuff he did leave where it's highly susceptible for some erosion. Left some area there with the cover crop going and no till into it. This planter is not set up to be able to do that. So tilling it under is a good baby step. And planting light, we were able to, it didn't cost us a lot of money. We're still getting some erosion control, we're still building a little bit of soil health, and moving in the right direction. So it can work. So, yeah.
When you strip your hives, are you using regular hives?
I don't. So they were upgraded knives in order to put on the stabilizer. I don't remember exactly what they were, but they were being made a little bit more invasive than what we'd like. I mean, the least disturbance you can, it would be awesome. But I don't remember exactly what was there. We'd be able to figure it out. I'll be over at the booth and stuff too, so definitely come check out our some of the tools that we got up there, and more than happy to show any of the stuff we've been working on. So, but, thanks guys.